America prides itself on freedom, a beacon of hope and opportunity for many around the world. The ideals of liberty and justice are deeply ingrained in the national consciousness. Yet, its history tells a different story, one that is often marred by conflict and struggle. This is a story of broken treaties and unkept promises, a narrative that reveals the darker side of American history. It is a story that forces us to question, can we trust America to keep its word? Can a nation built on the principles of freedom and justice reconcile with its past? Throughout its history, the United States government signed countless treaties with indigenous nations, agreements that were supposed to foster peace and mutual respect. These agreements were meant to ensure peace and cooperation, to create a foundation for coexistence and shared prosperity. However, these treaties were often broken, leaving a legacy of mistrust and betrayal. Land was stolen and lives were lost. The promises made were shattered, leading to devastating consequences for indigenous communities. The story of broken treaties is not confined to indigenous peoples. It extends to other marginalized groups who have faced similar betrayals. African Americans brought to this land in chains were also promised freedom and equality. The journey from slavery to freedom was fraught with hardship and broken promises. The Emancipation Proclamation and the Reconstruction Amendments offered hope for a better future, a chance to rebuild and claim the rights that had long been denied. But these promises, enshrined in law, were also betrayed. The reality of freedom was overshadowed by systemic racism and discrimination. Jim Crow laws and systemic racism replaced the chains of slavery with new forms of oppression, creating barriers that African Americans continue to fight against. This essay delves into the unsettling reality of broken treaties in America, exploring the deep-seated issues that have shaped the nation's history. It examines the experiences of indigenous peoples and African Americans, highlighting their struggles and resilience in the face of adversity. It seeks to uncover the hidden history of America's past, bringing to light the stories that have been overlooked or forgotten, and it aims to inspire reflection on the meaning of justice and the true cost of freedom. What does it mean to be free? What is the price of justice? The story of America is complex, a tapestry woven with both triumphs and tragedies, victories and defeats. It is filled with both triumphs and tragedies, moments of great progress and times of profound injustice. To understand the present, we must confront the often uncomfortable truths of the past. Only by acknowledging and learning from history can we hope to build a more just and equitable future.
From the very first interactions, European settlers sought to claim indigenous lands. They arrived with a sense of entitlement, driven by a belief in their own superiority and a desire to expand their territories. The initial meetings were often marked by a facade of friendship and cooperation, but underlying these interactions was a clear intent to dominate and control. They made agreements they had no intention of keeping. These treaties were often signed under duress or through deceit, with promises that were never meant to be honored. The settlers viewed these agreements as mere formalities, tools to placate the indigenous peoples temporarily, while they continued their expansionist agenda. Treaties were signed with the promise of peace and coexistence. The language of these documents often spoke of mutual respect and shared prosperity, creating an illusion of fairness and justice. Indigenous leaders, hoping to protect their people and way of life, entered into these agreements in good faith, but these promises were quickly broken. The ink had barely dried on many of these treaties before the settlers began encroaching on indigenous lands, driven by an insatiable hunger for resources and territory. Protests and appeals by indigenous leaders were ignored or met with violence.
The desire for land, resources, and power fueled the relentless westward expansion of the United States. This expansion was often justified by the doctrine of manifest destiny, the belief that Americans were destined by God to spread democracy and capitalism across the continent. This ideology provided a moral veneer to the aggressive and often brutal policies that followed. One of the most egregious examples is the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868. This treaty was supposed to bring an end to the hostilities between the United States and the Lakota people, granting them ownership of the Black Hills and other lands in the region. This treaty promised the Lakota people ownership of the Black Hills, a sacred site in their culture. The Black Hills were not just a piece of land, they were central to the Lakota's spiritual and cultural identity, a place of profound significance and reverence. However, when gold was discovered, the US government broke the treaty and seized the land. The lure of wealth proved too strong, and the government chose to violate its own agreements, sending troops to forcibly remove the Lakota from their sacred lands. This betrayal led to the Battle of Little Bighorn and the massacre at Wounded Knee. These events were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern of violence and dispossession that characterized the US government's dealings with indigenous peoples.
The story of the Lakota is just one of many. Across the continent, countless indigenous communities faced similar betrayals and injustices. Each tribe had its own unique culture, history, and relationship with the land, but all were subjected to the same relentless pressure and exploitation. Across the continent, indigenous peoples faced similar fates. From the plains to the forests, from the deserts to the coasts, no region was spared from the encroachment and aggression of settlers and the US government. The Cherokee Nation, forcibly removed from their ancestral lands in the Trail of Tears, experienced the devastating consequences of broken treaties. This forced march, which led to the deaths of thousands, is one of the most tragic examples of the suffering inflicted upon indigenous peoples. The displacement, disease, and death inflicted upon indigenous communities left a lasting scar on the nation's conscience. These events are a stark reminder of the cost of expansion and the enduring impact of broken promises. The legacy of these actions continues to affect indigenous communities to this day, as they strive to preserve their cultures, reclaim their rights, and seek justice for the wrongs of the past.
The abolition of slavery marked a turning point in American history. However, the fight for true freedom and equality was far from over. Reconstruction offered a glimmer of hope, but it was short-lived. The promises made to African Americans, enshrined in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, were systematically broken.
The federal government, which had once fought to end slavery, retreated from its responsibility to protect the newly freed people. Southern states implemented black codes and Jim Crow laws. These laws stripped African Americans of their basic rights and relegated them to second-class citizenship. The right to vote, a cornerstone of democracy, was systematically denied through poll taxes, literacy tests, and violence. Lynchings and racial terror became commonplace. African Americans found themselves trapped in a system designed to maintain white supremacy.
The history of America is often told as a simplistic binary, black and white. This oversimplified narrative fails to capture the rich and intricate tapestry of racial and cultural interactions that have shaped the nation. However, this narrative obscures a more complex reality. The interactions between different racial and ethnic groups were far more nuanced and multifaceted than the binary suggests.
The deliberate mixing of indigenous and African peoples was a strategy employed to further marginalize both groups. This tactic was not just about social control, but also about economic exploitation and political domination. Interracial relationships, often born out of exploitation and abuse, resulted in children who did not fit neatly into the rigid racial categories imposed by society. These children, often referred to as mixed race or mulatto, faced unique challenges and discrimination.
These individuals, often of mixed indigenous and African ancestry, posed a threat to the established social order. Their very existence questioned the validity of the racial hierarchies that were so deeply ingrained in society. Their very existence challenged the notion of racial purity that underpinned white supremacy. This challenge was not just social, but also ideological, as it undermined the very foundations of racial segregation and discrimination.
To maintain control, those in power sought to erase these mixed identities. Government policies and social practices were designed to force individuals into rigid racial categories, denying their complex heritage. People were forced to choose one racial category or another, their heritage denied and their stories silenced. This erasure was a deliberate act to maintain the status quo and prevent any potential unity among marginalized groups.
This deliberate blurring of identities served to divide and conquer, weakening the collective power of both indigenous and African American communities. By fostering division, those in power could more easily exploit and control these groups, ensuring their continued dominance. Despite these efforts, the resilience and strength of mixed-race individuals and communities have endured. Their stories, though often silenced, continue to be a testament to the enduring spirit of resistance and unity. Today, the legacy of these mixed identities is celebrated as a symbol of the rich cultural diversity that defines America. The blending of indigenous and African heritages has contributed to a more inclusive and multifaceted understanding of what it means to be American.
The story of America, with its broken treaties and unfulfilled promises, echoes ancient tales of injustice. The Bible, often cited as a source of moral guidance, is replete with stories of oppression, betrayal, and the struggle for liberation.
The Israelites enslaved in Egypt yearned for freedom. Their story, a testament to the human spirit's resilience, resonates with the experiences of enslaved Africans in America.
Moses, leading his people out of bondage, embodies the hope for deliverance that sustained generations of African Americans. Yet the Bible also warns against the dangers of repeating the sins of the past.
The Israelites, after escaping slavery, went on to conquer and subjugate other peoples. Their actions serve as a cautionary tale, reminding us that the pursuit of freedom must be accompanied by a commitment to justice for all.
If you like this kind of video and enjoy learning and reviewing our wonderful history, please like, subscribe, and share this video with the world. Thank you for your support, and until the next video.